Welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Darin.
I'm Jonny.
And today we're going to be covering The Last of the Mohicans, directed by Michael Mann and starring Daniel Day-Lewis and Madeleine Stowe and Wes Studi. A formative movie, I would say. But Jonny, we've had special guests on before. I want to say that we've had very many great guests, I think, and we've had your wife on. We've had some celebrities on, but I think this might be our most special guest. She's definitely special to us.
Special, yes.
And for our bucket list season, I was like, well, who have we not talked to that I've always wanted to talk to? And so I thought this would definitely be a bucket list conversation. She is my friend ever since I can remember. I know that we will talk about it. I know that we met in junior high school, but it seems like she's been my compatriot, my sister from another mister, I want to say, for as long as I can remember. I think Jonny has the same thing. Jennifer Ellen Davis Young. How are
Oh
you
my
doing,
gosh.
beautiful?
You had to use the whole name, didn't you? I
Yep.
just have to tell you though, ever since I realized that my initials were JEDY, sometimes almost Jedi is something
Oh,
that I use
okay. All right. I like that.
because it's
That's cool.
JEDY, not JEDI. I was so close.
Right, right.
Anyway.
So again, this is a very special we've been friends forever, like I said. And so having you on this for this chat, also I thought what movie could we possibly chat about? And Last of the Mohicans seemed to be like the natural choice. I think we had a few arguments or maybe light disagreements about the movie. Is that how you would put it? How would you put it?
That's such a great question because I don't really remember arguing about this
Okay.
movie in particular. I remember some of the arguments we've had over movies, but I don't remember this one.
Okay. Well, I'll try to
So,
start some new arguments. Uh, anyway, so we just want to maybe catch up a little bit. I know that Jenny, you come out to Utah to visit because your family's still out here, and so we've seen each other off and on. Johnny's seen you off and on. So just as far as our histories go, let's just start here. Like I'll basically say what I remember, and then you'll tell me if I'm wrong, and then we'll have Johnny do the same thing. But we were in a play called Time and Time Again in junior high school, which is a Back to the Future Grease riff, if I remember that correctly. And I believe we're at one of the parties. I think the play had ended. I'm not quite clear on that, but I think the play had ended. We're over at a friend's house. I'd left and wandered off. And then I was sitting on the sidewalk and I looked over and I knew who you were because I think I chatted with you before, but I saw you walk up and then I'm not sure how you knew I was off by myself, or you just felt sorry for me, or you're just out up for a walk yourself and we sat down. But ever since that moment where we sat down and started talking to each other, we really haven't stopped talking to each other. Did I get that correctly?
well, I could have sworn that we were in a play together earlier than Time and Time Again when I was in seventh grade. And and there was a song in it, like Home is Where the Heart Is. I don't know.
Interesting.
I remember us sort of bonding over me having a crush on some guy, like normal. And then you were my sounding board. And then when I do remember that party that you're talking about, because I think it was at Liz's house,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken. And I remember going to Albertsons and buying baby food of all things. Like, just the weirdest thing. But then
We
I
did
also
that.
do remember talking to you about and that's when you told me about your dad. And I was I don't know, just really touched by how hard that must have been for you. And anyway, and so then I just, like you said, we started talking and then we never stopped.
Right, right. Yeah, I would think I have my wife, I have Johnny, I have you. And I think those are and my parents to a degree, but there are some things that you just don't talk to your parents about. But
Yeah.
the three people on this podcast, on this episode, are basically I tell everything to. Like Jenny, you knew me inside and out. And so that's how we're able to talk. And it's the same thing. We told each other crushes. We nursed each other through relationships, things like that.
Yeah.
We maybe had a couple of almost where we almost entered, but I think subconsciously we were like, I don't want to ruin what we've got, even though,
Right.
whatever would have happened. But it was that kind of thing. But again, you're my compatriot, my sounding board, like everything we would talk constantly on the phone, that kind of thing. So anything that I needed to get off my chest, you were the person that I would turn to. Johnny, what about you? How did you meet our friend here?
All right. Well, Jenny and I go back way back, way back to was it kindergarten or was it like first, second grade? I don't know when it was. It was like we
So
were
I was trying to remember, Johnny, because I swear, who was your second grade teacher?
second grade was Anderson. Mrs.
Okay, I had Mrs. Burr. Did you have Jenkins in
I
third
had
grade?
Jenkins. We were in Jenkins together for the first time, I think.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, but I think we knew each other before that,
Yeah.
but we kind of like started becoming friends in Mrs. Jenkins' class.
In Jenkins, because you were right, like behind me, because Craddock and Davis, we were always close by each other. So like that's how.
Yes.
And you were my cheating partner. I would always cheat off of you. I don't know if you know that. You were the smart one, so I'd look over your paper and see what you wrote down because you would come right. So
Oh, but that just reminds me though, like in Mrs. Jenkins' class, I think she like so you and I asked if like our parents if they like we wanted to skip to the next grade.
yeah, they brought us to aside and said we want to skip you guys to fourth grade, and we were like, what?
And we're like, no way.
But it's only because you were so smart. I benefited from your smartness.
So you were cheating off her paper, and so you basically rid on her coattails to get skipped to the next grade. Is that what would have
No, but
happened?
then
So it would have happened, yeah.
that's hilarious.
All right.
Anyway, but then Johnny was like the drummer that every girl in our elementary school was in love with. And so I also got to listen to a lot of his like relationships. The
Oh, yeah.
first one of his relationships I remember is a girl named Christy. I don't remember her last name, but she
Hamilton.
was,
Hamilton.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, fun times.
Wow. And then obviously we graduated. I'm actually a year ahead of both of you. So I graduated in
Yes.
95. You both graduated in 94. But again, as soon as
Six.
96, sorry, I'm going backwards. So yeah, that's kind of the bond that we all had. And I don't know, just it's really, really special. And so just the fact, you have some friends that you keep forever, right? And Jenny, I even believe that when I met my wife, that you were part of the package deal. I was like, now I've got a friend named Jenny. And she's basically my sister. It's not somebody you should be jealous of, but she's going to be part of the package. I'm going to be talking about her a lot. And so again, I think you and my wife have kind of had a good bond, a good friendship. So there's none of that, none of that worry there.
I love you. I love Elizabeth. She's
Yeah.
great.
I like that she likes me. I guess that's a big thing. That's very patient. So as far as we were talking off air, like what have you been up to? Like you said, you were going to school and what you were talking about was fascinating. So I just kind of want to with NostalgiaCast, when we have guests on, we just want to make sure that the people that listen to us love our guests. And so just what have you gone back to school for? What are you studying? Both Johnny and I were just kind of, wow, we need to talk about that.
Okay, so the reason that I'm going back to school is largely because I have a household of neurodivergent children. We have lots of ADHD, a little bit of autism, a little bit of Tourette's, just like this, that, and the other, some depression, anxiety, that kind of stuff. As a mom, in my pursuit of trying to find good solutions for my children for their mental health and better functionality, I was just kind of led to a lot of roads that had to do with trying to find more precision medicine and also using nutrition as a support tool. So right now I'm in a human biology program, and I would like to go into a master's program that helps with either like precision nutrition, and maybe even some like precision pharmacogenetics, which is just genetic testing to see what medications might work best for someone's individual physiology. Anyway, and that's all in pursuit of wanting to help families of children that have mental health challenges and or neurodivergence have even better solutions than they can find now, because there are some things that are really hard to fix for some families to help their family function better and have a more cohesive feel to it. And then also, as I've come into the human biology program, I've seen a lot of kind of gaps where a lot more medical research needs to be done. So I've also gotten a soft spot, especially for the age that I am, for perimenopausal women, and would also like to help that demographic with some better solutions as well. So.
Well, there's
That's
a
really
lot more. Yeah, there's a lot more science figuring this stuff out. I don't know what your opinion is too, like autism and the ADHD. That seems to be a little bit more prominent or prevalent nowadays than it was when we were kids. Gluten free. That's another thing that's just all of a sudden magically appeared over the last 10 years. And I think I don't know, is that because of like sciences or just basic different?
Okay, so there's kind of an
physiologies?
there's kind of an argument between is it more prevalent or is it just being better recognized and diagnosed?
Right, right.
And there's definitely better recognition and diagnosis. However, there are still arguments to be made for the increasing incidence of lots of different challenges. What's exciting to me is now they're starting to see more of a connection between metabolic health and mental health. Because a lot of our neurotransmitters are actually developed in the gut and they go up the vagus nerve into our brain. And so metabolic health is such a crucial component of mental health that has been not utilized as a tool the way it should have been probably the whole time because science is really just now making more of these connections. Another consideration is the microbiome. Microbiome is just the microbes that are in our gut that help our health, hopefully. There are also pathogenic microbes that can be problematic. But I've also thought of going into possibly like microbiome remediation, but it's really just in its infancy as far as research. So it might be hard to find a foot in there.
Yeah. But if we can get a leg up on that kind of stuff, that's a great field to be involved in. Again, something to be very proud of, and we're very proud of you for going back to school and figuring that. Again, it's the personal thing, right? You see that in your family, you want to help that first. And so if you can go to school and learn that and it can benefit other people, that's a huge thing. So yeah, definitely something to be proud of. And so we want to see you succeed at that. John, any questions or thoughts on any of that?
Well, you can see why I cheated off of her. Look how smart she is. My
Just imagine you could be going into the same field right now if you kept cheating off
no,
her
that's
desk.
smart.
All right. So Last of the Mohicans, this is obviously 1992. I believe it came out in the fall and it was September. It was an Oscar contender. But as far as our histories of the movie go, Jenny, what is your history with Last of the Mohicans? Usually for our bucket list season, I basically asked, well, why is this on your bucket list? But like I said at the top of the episode, the bucket list here is actually having you on to talk about this particular movie. But what are your specific message of the movie? When did you first see it? How did you become obsessed with it?
So I saw it in the theater because one of my older sisters took me to see it. And it was really like, it had to be done like very secretively because it was rated R.
Right.
My mom would have like had an absolute fit if she had known. Like it was just like it was very taboo.
Right.
So my impression of it at the time was like deeply profound. I think it was one of the earliest films that I really remember having a reaction to politics, starting to gain insight into the differences of cultures that would clash. Also, the plight of Native Americans,
Mm-hmm.
and just all of the things like I don't know the entitlement of the white settlers. There were just so many themes that like were just all of a sudden, and it was also just I don't know deeply. Almost traumatic for me. I cried for at least 2 hours after the movie was over
Huh.
because of romantic themes, but also just because of like man's inhumanity to man. I feel like that's one of the strongest themes throughout this whole movie. And what's funny is that I view the characters very differently now than I did then, just because of life perspective. Back then, I feel like I thought there was very like clear delineations between who was right and who was wrong and blah blah blah. And now it's just very much like shades of gray, sort of, because you can see the perspective and the ignorance on both sides. So, well, on multiple sides, I should say.
Okay. And that's all stuff that hit you the first watch, is what you're basically saying. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That is deeply resonant, especially on a first watch. I do remember you telling me that you'd seen the movie, and my first reaction was, "It's rated R, though. How did you get in?" Right. So that's a weird kind of dynamic to have in Utah, but it's very normal for all of us. You have to have somebody that's of age or someone that looks of age to sneak you in, so you can see these or witness these things. But Johnny, what are your you've mentioned Last of the Mohicans many times on the show before, and so I didn't remember that until I already committed Jenny to talking about this movie. But what is your history with the movie?
All right. Well, I have tried over the years many times to watch this movie. And my problem is I'd always try to watch it late at night when I was really tired or when I was like, going to bed. And so the music would lull me to sleep. And it starts with that really pretty theme, and I would just be like, "Oh, it's so pretty," and I'd fall asleep. I miss
Right?
everything. And I tried several times. So I've only seen it once, and that was just a couple hours ago.
All the way through. So you made it. You made it all the way through without falling asleep.
I made it through the movie, and I stayed awake, so it was a big accomplishment for me. But I can see why people like this movie. Like, I finally get it. I've
Oh.
always liked the music. I've always thought it was an amazing theme, and it's one of my favorite scores. It's just so catchy, and it's just so fits the mood of the movie so well. But I think I see what you're saying, Jenny, but I know, sorry. I know it's exciting and it's all that stuff and it's all romantic, all that stuff's in there. It's all there. But I find myself getting bored and I can't figure out why. Like, I don't understand why I'm getting bored watching this movie. It makes me worry about me. Like, what's wrong with me? Why am I getting so bored? But I don't know. We can talk about other things that bore me about it, but overall, I think it's really well done. I think again, the music is what makes it for me. But I'm just happy I made it through.
Yeah, congrats. Huge congrats. We're making some huge strides. Jenny's back in school studying like biology and how to cure everything, and Johnny's just made it through a movie for the first time. So we're doing really good. So
Only for years.
my history of this movie, Jenny, I believe you and your sister took me to see this. I think we went to go see in the
Were you
Dollar
there
Theater,
with
maybe.
us?
Not your first time. I remember you telling me how much you liked it, and so I think you went back and saw it again. I know that I saw it with you, and
Wow,
it
my
wasn't with a
memory
parent.
has so many holes.
Yeah, well, it's been a while. It's been what, 33 years, right? Again, Johnny just had Jason on for an episode, and he didn't remember watching the movie, period. So we're all differing kind of memory holes. But yeah, I remember watching this, and I was impressed with the action and the period piece stuff. It's very authentic. But also, I think when I say that we got in some arguments over, I think I was confused because. And Johnny, this is one of the things that I want to talk about when we talk about this episode. I want to kind of dig in and figure out why this movie would lull somebody to sleep. I think I've got a finger on it or a handle on it that maybe might explain that. But I just remember liking the action. I thought that the characterizations were pretty empty. I didn't get a lot of stuff or didn't feel a lot of it. And so when you were like, I didn't understand, first of all, and spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen this movie that's 33 years old, but when Alice jumps off the cliff after Uncas, I was like, why did she do that? Like I was genuinely confused why I didn't know. And you went into this whole thing about they were in love. And I'm like, how did you get that from the movie? And you're telling me the different kinds of visuals. So what defend yourself here, Jenny?
Oh, I absolutely will defend myself. Like several times through this movie, Uncas is watching Alice. And I think he's looking at her from the lens of she's suffering and she is an innocent. And I think he feels very protective of her. Um, he watches her when they're like climbing up these rocks, and I feel like he can feel her despondency because they went through three very traumatic, violent incidents in a very short amount of time. You have to remember that these girls are coming from a very protected, affluent background where they would have never been exposed to any of this. And so it would have been horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, he's used to the wildness of nature. He's used to violence. He's used to the, just life's rough characteristics. And she is just shell shocked right from the beginning. And so, because of, what's his name? Magua, when he first, it's not very far into the movie when Magua first does that attack on all those British soldiers. And then Nathaniel and Uncas and their father are there because they had been tracking the war party.
Right.
Anyway, but there are several times that you just see Uncas watching Alice through this whole thing and wanting to protect her and wanting to like save her. And I don't think it was just that though when she jumped. I think she realized, well, first of all, she was like seriously shocked and depressed from what had happened violently, just again and again and again. But then I think also she watched Magua and she had seen his cruelty. And I think she decided there are some things worse than death, and I don't want to live through that.
Yeah,
So,
it's the culture shock of it, right? That's on
yeah,
top of everything else. Like it's obviously they're dealing with all that, but she doesn't know what's going on. There's literally a shot when they're trying to deal they're bargaining, right, for who's going to go away, who's going to be kept captive. And there's a shot of her when they start pulling Cora away where she doesn't understand what's happening. Nobody's
yeah,
telling her anything. The
yeah,
Native Americans, the Iroquois, or the Huron don't speak to her. They're not
yeah,
communicating, right? So
yes,
she might think that this is her life now. She might think that she's going to be a concubine or the wife of this horrible, horrible murderer, right? And so she doesn't know. Yeah, all this stuff is very clear now. I just remember my maybe not too adult brain watching the movie. It didn't click a lot of the time because it wasn't you have Hawkeye and Cora that are talking the whole time, and they're the ones that are connecting through language, right? And with Uncas and Alice, it's just furtive glances, really. And there's a part I think where
yeah,
they're in the waterfall where she almost falls and he grabs her and they hold each other, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
all very, very subtle, and I think that has to do a lot with why Johnny might be bored or why some people might be bored with it. It's really, really subtle, a lot of the stuff and the dialogue.
There's a lot of subtlety, but I feel like there's a lot of power behind it if you can like look into the details.
Right, right. So as far as that goes, we have we talked about our histories with the movie, our first impressions, but watching it again after 33 years, Jenny, I think you texted me a couple times saying that I feel a lot different about this movie now than I did. But watching it again for this conversation, what's different now? But what's different now and from then? What's changed for you for the movie, if anything?
When I watched the first time, I had a very adolescent girl brain that was just hyper focused on romance.
Yeah, as you do.
Yes.
Right.
Now I see political discord, which a lot of it makes me angry because historically women have been on the end of all of the suffering of men's arrogance and the battles they've created. In a lot of cases it's mostly men that are having war,
Hmm.
waging war. Also, I find a few things just don't connect for me. Like, I just feel like the relationship between Cora and Hawkeye is such a plot device in this movie
Hmm.
because it feels like they haven't known each other very long at all. And so them forming that quick of a connection feels like a trauma bond, not actual affection.
Hmm.
That bothers me because I know how dangerous that can be. Also, those girls would have never been allowed to go anywhere without chaperones, ever. Duncan would have made sure that they had chaperones because of the English culture. Their father, once they were in the fort, would have made sure that they had chaperones. Those girls would have never gone anywhere by themselves. And although I still believe that Cora could have had a very independent and strong spirit, I don't feel like her trauma that she would have experienced was something that was presented any way that was authentic. I think Alice's was,
Hmm.
but Cora would have also been very deeply impacted by all of this violence. Um, and I just feel like, I don't know, the relationship seems too fast. It seems like it was way too serious for what would have been appropriate for the time. I mean, it basically looks like in the movie that like they sleep together. And
Okay.
I'm like, her instincts would have been screaming at her, coming from a largely innocent background, to protect herself from anything that would have like taken her outside of the safety of her culture at the time. And so that just felt super off to me. It just felt like, oh gosh, they wanted to put in a sex scene, so they did.
Hmm.
Um, so that really bugged me. Um, and then I don't know, I just keep getting angry, first of all, because of like, what was happening with the English settlers, like taking all of these lands and being super violent. And I can kind of understand where Maga was coming from because I see him more as a tragic character now than a bad guy. Um, and I don't know. Then at the end by the end of the movie, I just feel like the focus is so much on revenge and romance, kind of takes away from like the other messages. I feel like this is a really white centric story for wanting to illuminate things that were going on with Native Americans at the time.
Hmm.
So I do have a problem with some of the writing. Um, and then I don't know, it just there's there's just too much that feels like it was like contrived instead of natural. Although I do feel like the politics of war were probably represented fairly authentically.
Yeah. There's a separation between what was made in 1992 and the different mindsets versus what you sense of it now, right? And that's definitely something that I do want to talk about. But Johnny, if you finally made it through again, congratulations. But different, what kept you awake this time? Or is there anything you haven't said that you felt differently, haven't said so far that you felt differently about this watch than previous watches?
Well, like you, Darren, there's a lot of things that I missed when I was watching it. And my wife kept like explaining things to me as we were watching because she loves this movie, just like Jenny. And in fact, Jenny, when I think of this movie, I think of you. Is that weird? That you come to mind?
So weird.
Yeah. But anyway, we were watching it, and she kept, explaining the plot and the story, what's going on. And see what's happening. See what's happening. I'm like, yeah, I see what's happening. I get it. I'm like, so she tried to stay awake. But anyway, I think this movie takes multiple viewings because there's a lot of things you're gonna miss if you don't watch it more than once. One time's not enough for this movie. And I think if I were to watch it again, I would appreciate it even more. And the more I watch it, the more I would like it. So yeah, I mean, I gotta watch it again, obviously, to get some more feedback for you there, Darren. But
No, it's fine.
having seen it once now, I like I said, I can see why people like this movie.
Okay.
It's pretty well done.
Well, we'll talk through it again over the years. When I saw it the first time, Jenny, I liked it, but I really felt it was a superficial movie. I didn't think there was anything deeper to it. We'll talk about Michael Mann. I think this is a very, very visceral movie, especially in the action scenes. It's very like it's quick and it hits, right? It's like a knife almost. But watching it now, all the kind of the subtext really is bleeding through a lot more for me the more that I watch it. And there are a couple things I read a few more articles this time. I'm like, oh my gosh, and it sort of opened my eyes to the storytelling. We want to talk about that, but again, I think from the Michael Mann perspective, he's very, like I said, a visceral filmmaker, and a lot of his other movies are very talky. Like his most famous movie, which is Heat. I know Johnny's seen it. I don't know if you've seen it, Jenny, but it's a 3 hour movie. It's very, very, very talky. And it's talky to the point where people are literally telling you how they feel, which is like the opposite of this movie, where you really have to parse out and think about what you're watching to understand what they're talking about. Because a lot of the text of the movie is subtext and you have to read into it. So we'll definitely want to talk about that. But I do want to talk about this is Jenny, we had Jason on for Lord of the Flies, and that was a movie that didn't really engage me as much as the book did. And this is kind of the opposite. The movie really engaged me, and the book has never been something that I've been impressed with. The book feels really even more superficial, and it's weird because it just seems to be a bunch of a series of escapes of like fights and escapes. The thing with the waterfall in the book happens maybe a quarter of the way into the book, and so the rest of the movie is they escape, they get captured. Hawkeye and Uncas and Chingachgook get away. They have to go and save Cora and Alice, and then they get captured, and then they get away, and it's just a series of those again and again and again. So it's like, wow. And there's a point where they corner Magua in a cave, and Hawkeye dresses as a bear of all things. So he has a fight with Magua in a bear costume of all things. So the way that Cooper wrote, again, he's known as one of the I guess the father of the American frontier author, stuff like that. And Mark Twain very famously liked to nitpick James Fenimore Cooper. I'm just going to read you a quote just so we can get this off of our chest here. But Mark Twain wrote an article called Fenimore Cooper's Literary Offenses. And he says, every time a Cooper person is in peril and absolute silence is worth $4 a minute, he is sure to step on a dry twig. In fact, the Leatherstocking series ought to have been called the Broken Twig series. So this character, Natty Bumppo or Hawkeye, he was actually based on a real guy. Um, but I think his name is also Nathaniel. But anyway, so he integrated him into these three novels, these Leatherstocking tales. So those books are The Deerslayer, The Last of the Mohicans, The Pathfinder, The Pioneers, and The Prairies. This is like a series of movies, kind of like a Native American tracker, Daniel Boone, Sherlock Holmes type. But I guess that's where the movie really became, or the character really became famous. And there have been 11 adaptations of this. in America. There's a famous
Wow.
1920 version of it. It stars, let's see, Wallace Beery, and then the 1936 version with Randolph Scott. That's the one that Michael Mann saw when he was, I think, 3 or 4 years old. He had in his neighborhood, they had a church community center, and they would screen movies like every weekend. And so in the basement one day when they were screening these movies, he saw the 36 Last of the Mohicans, and it stuck with him. I think the juxtaposition he says of the Native American dress versus the British soldier dress that really stuck out to him, and he liked kind of the politics of it. But yeah, this has been a very popular character. It's odd that 92 is the last time anybody bothered adapting this story. But are either of you familiar with the book? Did you read the book in school or anything like that?
No.
Okay. What about you,
I
Jenny? Any
knew that
history?
I knew that the movie was adapted from a book, but
Right.
I have never read it. I did know that in the book, Cora dies and that
Right.
she doesn't die in the movie.
And it's
But
switched. I think Alice is the older character and Cora is the younger character. And Uncas is actually in love with
oh,
Cora. And the same thing, like she gets stabbed or something on a cliffside and he gets killed by
oh.
Magua. And then Hawkeye kills Magua. But again, that's 3/4 of the way in the book. There's still a lot of stuff that happens after that. So I really like how Mann and Christopher Crowe streamline this movie into what it is. I think it hits the same points. But the other thing with Cooper's book is it's very childish, I guess you could say, because he sides more with the British soldiers than he sides with the Native Americans. I guess the attitude of the time was that, yeah, nobody realized what was happening with the Native Americans being forced off their land. The party line is that America, like the American settlers, were the ones that were here and they settled everything first. And so the interesting thing about this movie is it's definitely about the stamp that you leave behind, the legacy that you leave behind, and how the Native American legacy is being erased by these American settlers. There's the part where Hawkeye and Cora are talking in the burial ground at night, and I just got the sense when he's talking about the American frontier that the American pioneers were kind of like a flood that were sweeping in and just covering everything and like washing away the history and the legacy. And it's just so sad. For our far and away conversation we had last time, Johnny, you remember there's a brief shot of Native Americans watching the land race. And the look that they give says volumes because they were here first. And the Americans basically forced them off to places that were arid and dry. And now they're coming and they're claiming the places that are arid and dry. And they're basically giving the land away to people in land rushes. And so it's just these Native Americans watching, go, how far? But again, that's a big stamp of this movie, I think. Jenny, does that also tie in with what, like recent watches of this movie?
Definitely. I really love that Daniel Day-Lewis embraced the character as much as he did because I do feel like a lot of that culture was represented at least somewhat authentically by him and by the actor who played Uncas and how do you say his name?
Chingachgook,
Changu. Yeah, Chingachgook.
Russell Means.
Um, yeah, I loved that portrayal. In fact, at that opening scene of the movie when they have shot the deer and they're asking the deer's forgiveness, I really feel like that was one of my first introductions to how much Native Americans valued life and how respectful they were of life and the land, and what good stewards they were of like nature. And whereas I feel like the English settlements came in and probably the French as well, just and they were takers of the land. They weren't as much stewards of the land. And so I don't know, and it just kind of like bleeds then into like modern day like issues of how we take care of the earth and stuff for me, that play into like wanting to be respectful of nature and you know that not being the case in a lot of times, but then also the plight of the Native Americans that with the clash of the way they saw the land as like nobody owned it, but you could utilize the resources wisely. And then white men came and they were like, oh, we can claim the land and then we own it and
Mhm.
everything on it is ours. And I just felt like that disconnect was so horribly tragic.
Yeah. Again, it's all layered in there. You just have to look for it. I think that might be the thing. And Johnny too, I also think that the dialogue is mostly it seems like it's whispered a lot of it. Like it's very calm. They never unless they're under a waterfall and it's Hawkeye yelling at Korra, right? It's
Yeah.
everything's very calm. Everything's, they're obviously trying to keep quiet. They don't want to be tracked, things like that. And I think that works to its favor, but also to its detriment because a lot of times you can get bored if they're because again, the visual language of the movie I thought was fantastic. It opens with a chase scene and we slowly parse what's happening. It's like, is this white guy chasing the Native Americans? Are the Native Americans chasing this white guy? Oh, no, the white guy is teamed up with one of the Native Americans. Are they chasing this other Native? Nope, they're not. They're all hunting. So you're slowly parsing stuff together to the point where when the I call them HUC, so Hawkeye, Uncas, and Chingachgook, when they come across the Cameron's cabin again and they've all been massacred, they don't
Oh,
explain anything. Like they it's or when they you see them tracking and you don't know how they come upon the Huron war party, like they don't really explain what's happening. A movie today would say they'd have Chingachgook and Hawkeye going, "What are you doing?" Well, I noticed that the Hurons walk this way. There's none of that. It's mostly dialogue less because that's how these characters would talk to each other in real life, right? And again, it's the opposite, Johnny, of Heat, where everybody is saying what everybody thinks and all the time. And
Yeah.
so it's just different. I mean, do you think that might have had something to do with your
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. I think like you were talking about Michael Mann. This is the least Michael Mann-esque movie I've ever seen. Like it's more of an epic,
yeah.
just landscape movie. And Michael Mann isn't really about that. He's more, like you say, over the shoulder coverage and walkie and kind of handheld, the whole look that he's known for. And this movie doesn't have that at all. So if you didn't know it was Michael Mann, you wouldn't know it was Michael Mann.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, I think the whole quiet dialogue, I mean, the dialogue was great. I thought they had some good lines, it was a good script. I just thought there were times where I just was like, can I leave now? Can I do something else? I'm getting bored. So, like I say, I gotta watch it again. So I'll watch it again and I'll come back and tell you what I
Okay.
really.
But that's at least an endorsement of the movie, right? You at least want
Oh
to
yeah,
watch it again.
yeah, I do want to
Jenny,
watch.
what you're saying about the romance being a plot device, you're absolutely right. I think that's what a lot of critics really had a problem with when the movie came out. I know Siskel and Ebert, they recommended it for the subtext more than what was in front of them. They thought a lot of that was empty. So that's a very valid claim, right? And we'll talk about all this stuff. Like I said, I want to come back to Man, but we've already mentioned Daniel Day-Lewis. We kind of talked about Magua and Cora. So let's just talk briefly about the acting here and what we think of the acting choices. And it just basically comes down to the three actors, I think. Daniel Day-Lewis, Madeleine Stowe, and Wes Studi are the front and center characters here. You can also make a case for Uncas. Eric Schweig is his name. I want to make sure that we drop him. And then Jodie May plays Alice. Again, very good at the silence, very good at I think just to get them out of the way, I think the Uncas and Alice characters are great silent movie characters. That's what you'd get in a silent movie. There's no real dialogue. It's just all those glances, right? But Daniel Day-Lewis, again, famously a method actor, he did go through a rigorous training, like regimen for this movie. He studied with an expert. Again, Daniel Day-Lewis didn't know how to do all this stuff. He just barely came off of winning the Oscar for My Left Foot. And so he trained with this guy, Colonel Daniel Webster, who was no, David Webster, who was the trainer and technical advisor, who ran him through the entire thing, learning how to shoot, learning how to live on the frontier. I think the thing they say about Daniel Boone is if you drop Daniel Boone in the middle of the forest, he could live for 2 years straight, eating 3 meals a day without any hesitation, without any problem. And so Daniel Day-Lewis did that. He would go out, learn how to skin, learn how to kill his own prey, stuff like that. And so the method acting stuff, I think, worked for him. He's very like again today, if you were to make the movie, he'd be a buff Chris Hemsworth kind of guy where you see the six pack stuff. That's not Daniel Day-Lewis. I think Daniel Day-Lewis in here is more like the svelte, skinny, again, very fit and very rigorously trained, right? He's very physical in this. No shades to him there, but he's a different than what muscle bound people are. But again, I think he's very charismatic. He delivered some of my favorite lines, especially I think my favorite line in the movie is when he and Duncan Hayward are finally having an argument, and all he does is he looks him in the eyes and goes, "Someday I think you and I are going to have a serious disagreement." Again, it's very funny, he can deliver that
yeah.
line and just make it sound funny and kind of scare anything. But I think he's very good and very believable. Like you said, Jenny, I think he personifies the Mohican kind of personality. And it's funny reading a lot of the critiques of the movie because they claim that it was whitewashing. in this movie, which I don't understand because the character of Hawkeye, he says, I was a white child, my family was massacred. Chingachgook took me in. I'm raised by these Native Americans. And that was a very natural, ordinary thing that happened back then, where the Native Americans would take in white kids that had been abandoned and raise them as their own. And some kids went off and went to be politicians, so there's nothing wrong with that. But again, I think Day-Lewis is very good here. Jenny, what do you think about him, other than what you've already said about his personifying the Native American plight?
I think his acting is incredible in this movie, honestly. I also had read about some of his prep, and I don't know if the timeline is correct, but I read something that he lived in the wilderness for like 6 months learning all of this stuff, and even like learned how to make a canoe, like build a canoe,
Yeah.
and like all of this stuff. And I'm just like, that's incredibly impressive. I mean, I do question the wisdom of that, especially because they said he had like some claustrophobia and hallucination issues after all of this was over, because it had been so physically intense.
Yeah.
So then I start questioning, I'm like, is that really good for people? Anyway, when I was 14, almost 15, when I first saw this, by the end of the movie, I was in love with Daniel Day-Lewis. And I had never seen him in anything. I don't know if I've actually seen any of his movies since then,
Hmm.
which is just, I know. I've heard he's an amazing actor and other stuff. But I feel like his acting held up for me. I don't feel like all of the writing of his character held up for me, because of things that I feel like his character, because of some of the plot devices, took him outside of, I think, what his choices would have been. But as far as the acting goes, I think he was still fantastic.
Okay. Johnny, what do you think?
Well, I think he looks great with long hair, and the way it flows when he runs, and it just looks he looks great running. He's like a Tom Cruise of back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think again he's one of our best actors. I've always kind of wanted to be him. If I was going to be an actor, I'd want to be the guy who just picked and choose the roles you played and picked the right ones and like only did the most, dramatic roles or whatever, did the best roles you possibly could, which is what I think he does. He always picks just the right part to play. And you don't see him very often, but when he does show up, he does something amazing. You go, wow, how do you do that? So that's pretty impressive. But compared to his other movies that he's done, like My Left Foot and Lincoln and There Will Be Blood, this one pales in comparison. I don't think he's as good in this one as he has been or can be.
I think a lot has to do with it's not as demanding of him, right? Like
Yeah,
again, I think the writing here is very two-dimensional, and the real deep stuff, like I've mentioned several times, is the subtext that you're gonna either pick up on and jibe with or not. And again, if you're looking at some of his performances, like after this, I think was obviously we said My Left Foot, In the Name of the Father was after this. Gangs of New York, you're looking at that. Johnny, I know you're a big There Will Be Blood
oh
fan.
yeah,
And I think his performance in Lincoln might be maybe my favorite performance like I've ever seen. It's
it's
incredible watching
Jay,
him.
you gotta watch Lincoln. You
Yeah,
gotta
yeah.
watch.
You'd really like that one, but he is, I don't know how to explain it. He is Lincoln when you're watching it. Like you can see him thinking not of his next line, but of what Lincoln, you could actually sense that character coming. And I think it's just incredible. There Will Be Blood is the same thing. Gangs of New York is the same thing. I think he's incredible. I think his physicality in this movie and the charisma, he's an action star. That's all that he's called to do, but he does it well. It's just the type of movie that it is, it doesn't demand There Will Be Blood type acting from it, right? So I
Yeah,
guess that's the only other thing here. So he's just as good, but just in a different way. Madeleine Stowe, again, Johnny, you and I talked about her in Stakeout. She's a very credible love interest, and I think she has that fire. I think when Michael Mann hired her, he wanted somebody who could be super serious and could have that flame and have that independence, and I think she really nails that. And they impressed each other just because of his work ethic and then how she worked with his work ethic. He was never cruel to her. He just she was able just to pick up on what he wanted, and that's something that Michael Mann really appreciates. But as far as I mean, you're right. I think she's very smart, Jenny. I think she picks up a lot of. I like that even though she doesn't understand what's going on at the Cameron's cabin, she understands that there's something else happening that's keeping him from acting a certain way. And so she's senses that. So when they're at the burial ground, she goes over to him and she's like, I want to know what the difference is, what happened. So she wants to learn. I think it's like I said, it's the culture shock, but she's also like you said, Jenny, she's been sheltered. She's coming over here just to be kind of ferried from one place to another. And she's seeing all this stuff happening. And I think Madeleine Stowe, she really nails that. But again, my favorite part in here, I love the scene where they're in like the medical in Fort William Henry, right? And Hawkeye takes a moment. He almost walks out and then he turns and he starts staring at her, right? And today's climate, people be like, oh, that's really creepy. But she actually asked him, he was like, what are you staring at? He's like, I'm staring at you. He's so bold. But I think he knows that there's kind of a connection. Again, when they're in that burial ground, when she pulls out that gun that she's stolen, he doesn't question. He's like, what is a girl doing with a gun, right? He automatically passes her some of the gunpowder so she can be ready. He knows that she's capable. But I think he knows that there's a fire in her, and that's what he's in love with or he's attracted to here. So when he keeps staring, she does something amazing where you can sense her awkwardness at first. And then she looks down and she realizes that he's still staring. So she looks up and matches his gaze, and you can see like the firelight in her, like, ooh, like this is actually doing something for me in a way, right? It's so bold and she's not used to it, and he's a man of his word, and then she just matches his gaze and he smiles and he walks off. It's just that moment of connection. I think she really sells that. Jenny, what do you think about Madeleine Stowe in the movie?
I really liked her acting. I think that she did a really good job portraying the character, especially, given what she was given to work with the script. I really liked a lot of the nuance of her delivery. I just felt a lot of sincerity from her. Um, I felt the emotion between Cora and Nathaniel seemed very genuine, and so I really appreciate when actors can deliver that. Um, I feel like, how do I want to say this? I do like that the character, realizes that she had made a mistake in misunderstanding, not burying the Camerons. And then she came with open curiosity to talk about it. And then, was able to open her mind to something different than she was used to, just from the practical side of things. That living in a frontier kind of demands of people. Um, I'm trying to think of like other things. I don't know. She had quick wit. I just felt like, I didn't ever think about her acting, which is a sign to me that it was good. Because when I stop to think, how do I feel about this? To me, it's usually a sign that something doesn't feel authentic with the act. So I appreciated that she seemed sincere, and I think she did a good job given what she had to work with. So,
Well, again, she's just the romantic co-lead. I don't mean that to denigrate her at all, but when you are a romantic co-lead in a movie, there's only so much that's kind of demanded of you, right? Any other shades, it's like I said, it's that independence in her. It's that determination that really sells it. And I don't know if that's in the script so much as it's in her performance. Johnny, what about
great.
you? Anything to say about her?
Well, I like Madeleine Stowe, and I think she looks good, and the camera really likes her, and
Yeah.
she's very natural. And so, like you, Jenny, you can't tell she's acting. She looks great on the camera, on film. She looks just good, and she's a good actress. But she has this thing where she breathes everything she says, and then like it sounds like this when she's talking and saying her lines. So it's like, oh my gosh, every line's a breath. And so when she does that, I'm thrown back to 12 Monkeys, where she goes, "A party? You went to a pub?" So anyway,
That's a
but I
good
like
Madeline Stowe impression. Yeah, good job.
okay.
So I think what she says behind the scenes is when they would rehearse, she would like Mann wanted them to show up in full costume and full hair, and so when they would show up, he would have his little camera lens and he would walk around them. She and Jodie May walk around them with like the camera to kind of get an idea of how they would look on screen. And Stowe says, "I've never encountered that like in a movie before. Like he wants to be sure that I look as best as I possibly can." Again, she's got great matinee look. She's gorgeous. Obviously, she's talented. We said all that about her in Stakeout. So as far as and I think it's a fair criticism to say that Day Lewis and Madeline Stowe are kind of the Maria and Tony of this movie, right? They're kind of the stand-ins for what we're supposed to kind of recognize going on around them. I think the actor that really sells everything he's called on to sell, and whether it's subtext or not, Wes Studi does such a good job as Magua, there's an inner, he's mostly silent and he's threatening. Like if you see Wes Studi in real life in interviews, he's very charismatic and he's funny. Like he talks about when he was on set with Daniel Day-Lewis, he says, my goal was to get Daniel Day-Lewis's signature. And so we became friends. We acted a lot. Finally, at the end of the shoot, I was like, can I get your signature? And Daniel Day-Lewis said, sure. And he pulled out a pen with his hand. And Wes Studi goes, no, with your left foot. And so Daniel Day-Lewis signed his signature with his left foot. And so Wes Studi's like, and I got it. So he's very personable in real life. And I think that's a sign of a good actor because he's such a threat. When he pops in from the shadows at that first meeting with Colonel Webb or with General Webb, right? And he's been there the whole time, but we don't see him because he's literally in the dark and he steps out and he's villain coded, right? He just has this look on his face where he's just angry. And again, he has that part where he's talking to Haywood. It's like, I understand, like, you always kowtow to your women, right? That's the whole thing. And then Haywood's like, what did you say? It's like, I understand you very well. It's that kind of thing. But when he turns around and he lowers that tomahawk, and that's when he starts his attack. Again, very, very threatening. But the thing that's cool too is it's shades to his character, right? The script does not reveal what his motivations are immediately. Even Hawkeye, when he notices that he's got Cora dead to rights, he's like, why would he target the older woman? Why would he target the older sister? What's going on here? Again, he clocks that where Haywood does not. But his later scene with Montcalm, where there's this, the note I had down is like he projects like anger so well. And a lot of the subtext in the movie is right there in his performance. So even though Day-Lewis and Madeleine Stowe and Russell Means and Eric Schweig are right up front, it's Wes Studi that basically steals the movie, or that is the movie. Jenny, what do you think of his performance here?
Back in the day, like I just pegged him for like just the stereotypical bad guy. But like I said, I've come to really think of his character as very tragic, and I think he portrays that very well. I think you can see his building. I mean, even he's deeply unsettled and angry, but then you can see his anger even just elevate as the white English military leaders are just so incredibly arrogant, um, and assuming and entitled and just horrible. So I almost really empathize with him because later in the story, you find out his children were killed, his village was burned, his wife thought he was dead and remarried. He is a man that has nothing to lose, and he's got a chip on his shoulder the size of Texas. Like he is just angry, and for good reason. And then, he thinks he's probably almost doing an honor killing in his deal with Montcalm. That's the French guy, right?
Yep.
The French leader. Yeah. Anyway, and then, he's so angry because that also feels like a betrayal when he is able to like negotiate their surrender. So he just feels like he's constantly betrayed, belittled. Um, it just really angers me because I understand his desire for the vendetta. It just then makes me sad because I'm like, revenge is always a vicious cycle that just goes down. But anyway, yeah, the actor definitely portrays all of that incredibly well. I feel like his facial expressions are very clear. If you have eyes to see, he does a very good job portraying body tension. Just so much. He radiates anger and discontent. So
Yeah,
I thought
Johnny,
he
what
did a
about you?
really great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he was really, really well cast as the villain. I think what I wanted to see was him getting scalped at the end. That's what I wanted to have happen. I kept waiting for it. Like, is he going to get his scalp taken off of
Just
him? That would
desserts.
have been a great comeuppance for that character. But yeah, I mean, great job. No qualms.
I like what you said, Jenny, about his building anger. I think Monroe is just the stand-in for all of his anger, right? That's his target, and that's going to basically help his whole anger with what's going on. I like when he's talking to the chief later at the Huron village, and he's like, he basically says like, what I want to do is I want to start trading like the Americans, right? I want to start taking over land like the Americans. That is the
Yes.
only way that we're going to survive. But there's also an anger in his voice that's like, these people have come into our country and they're taking everything over and they're making us go away. That makes me so angry. So the only thing that we can do is just to be them, to give up our traditions, to forget about everything that we've been raised to do and just be what the Americans are, do what the Americans do. That's the only way to survive. And I think he's so angry about that. And it comes all the way through in his performance. So when Hawkeye's basically questioning him, like, would you do this? Would you embrace all the traditions? And he says yes. Like his only word is like toward the end in English. Like it's so there's so much righteous anger to him. And like we talked about, everything that Day-Lewis and Stowe aren't getting across in their performances, he's doing that wholeheartedly, like whole hog. And so again, I don't think he gets enough props for this movie. He shows up later, obviously, in stuff like Street Fighter and Heat and Geronimo, American Legend. I think he had the lead in that one. So he obviously made a name for himself, but I don't think he gets the attention that he deserves from this movie. But basically, not a big, heavy acted movie. Just to kind of see into the filmmaking a little bit, the thing that I want to say about Michael Mann, like I said, he's very, very visceral. You look at Manhunter, you look at The Insider, you look at even Miami Vice, for crying out loud, and Collateral. Johnny, I think you say that Last of the Mohicans is the least Michael Mann stuff. I think Collateral matches Last of the Mohicans with the landscapes. It's just Los Angeles is now the American frontier, and so you see the buildings and everything in the background. It's kind of the same aesthetic.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. But as far as the style is where the camera movements, the style matches better in Collateral than in this one. This
Right.
this music doesn't require that kind of handheld camera. This requires the dolly or on the steady cam. It requires that for the landscaping. But when you have something like Collateral or Ali, when they're just walking talks all the time, it's like, or you're in a car a lot of the time, the handheld thing works better.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's not a Michael Mann type movie because it's more, on a
Right.
dolly or steady cam.
And I think it came early enough in his career that he was basically trying to define himself. I think the stuff that you're talking about doesn't show up later until you get to Heat and stuff like that, where he's just
Yeah.
copying kind of the
There's
same
other
thing.
movies you can tell it's Michael Mann as soon as you
Yeah,
start watching. Like, oh yeah, this is a Michael Mann
right,
movie. This one, like I said, if you didn't know, you wouldn't know.
right.
So
Jenny, what do you think about the landscapes and the visuals and everything in the backgrounds? What do you think?
They're gorgeous. I thought the cinematography was so gorgeous. That I think the two main things that hold up for me without question of for this movie are the music and the landscapes. I just think they're amazing. I think that they really capture the frontier feel that he was going for. So
there
Okay.
was one moment I really liked, and that was when they're coming out of the woods and they see in the distance the bombs going off and the cannons being fired and the sky's being lit up. And like it's such a cool shot because you're like, what is that? And so you're kind of like leaning into the screen to see what's going on, and you realize, hey, they're having a war going on over there. But that was really fun for me. And there's another shot that I wanted to mention because I love it when a movie does something that I want it to do. Like when I'm watching it and as it's happening, it does what I think it should do. And there's a shot when they're behind this fence where they're kind of like, I forget where they're going. And so maybe back to the frontier Cameron's house or something like that. And
Cameron.
the shot is behind the fence. And I thought if that camera goes over the fence and then keeps going, I'll be happy. And it did it. So I
Yeah,
was like, all right. So, but if it stopped before, I would have been like, oh, what a missed opportunity. You know what I mean?
right.
So I was happy that it actually did what I wanted to do.
The cinematographer here, Dante Spinotti, he works with Mann on a regular basis. I think Mann gave him paintings by an 1800s painter named Thomas Cole, who actually did four paintings that are based on the Last Mohicans, scenes from it. And so that was the visual design of the movie. Man wanted to make sure that we had the landscapes and the rolling mountains, things like that. The other thing that I like, and Johnny, it's funny because it reminded me of another movie that puts you to sleep. I know that you said that Barry Lyndon is one of the most boring movies you've ever seen, but the way that Kubrick and John Alcott shot Barry Lyndon, they wanted to shoot it again, just like 17th or 18th century paintings. They used natural lighting. There's no movie lighting. Everything was done by candles or by sunlight. And so every shot looks like a painting. And so that's the whole movie. It gets kind of dull because nothing really interesting is happening there. What I love about their work here is it's very Mann again wanted to go for the naturalistic look. So when you're inside a cabin, there are shadows. Not everything is lit. Everything is really kind of dark. You have to, but that's how it is. It's very authentic. But the thing too, or even when Mog was talking with Montcalm at the end, like it's very naturalistic light, but they use lights. Spinotti used this in a way to make it seem very naturalistic. I think the look of the movie might also be why it maybe dulls you to sleep, Johnny, or dulls people to sleep because it's very, again, it's dark. It's naturalistic. You can't make out a lot of things, and so your brain kind of shuts off after a while, and it's hard to like be excited by what you're watching. Johnny, do you think that has anything to do
Well,
with
that
it?
was one of my biggest critiques is how dark it was. I understand that's, the feel they were going for, and I get that, and I think it was well done if that's what your goal was. But just for aesthetic, the look of the film, it needs to be a little bit lighter, just a little bit, not much, just a little bit, just so I can see a little better.
Right, and that's what I mean. That might be why it's kind of a turn off for some people. Johnny did or Jenny, did the darkness bother you at all? Or do you think that actually worked in its favor?
I think it was echoing the feel. I think a lot of the subject matter is very dark and heavy. So
Mhm.
I hadn't actually thought too much about the lighting, but I would just feel like if that is the case, then and I'm sure it is because you guys are experts in this, but
I don't know
I
about experts.
but I would imagine that it was just trying to echo that feeling.
Right. Well, all the costumes in here were designed from scratch, and they went through rigorous detail to make sure that it matched. All of the production design, the canoes. There's a 1919 oil painting by N.C. Wyeth that they copied almost exactly to get the canoes and the designs on everything. There's a book called Dead Certainties by a guy named Simon Schama, and it's about the death of General James Wolfe. But in there's a painting of the Iroquois surrounding General Wolfe. And the Iroquois, the detail is so fantastic that the tattoos on their faces are the tattoos that are on Wes Studi's face as Magua. So everything in here is authentic. I think that's the big thing with Mann is he wanted to be sure that everything from the lighting to the sound design, everything was matched and made it seem authentic. I think that really adds a lot to it. But let me, before we move on to the music, because I know that's the thing that we're all really attached to here, but I wanted to run something past you. This time, there's an article by Matt Zoller Seitz that I read, and I maybe should have shared this with both of you so you can look at it. But basically, he touched on something that I thought was really interesting, and I kind of switched it to something from my point of view. But he looks at this movie as a movie about sex and survival because it's basically about passing on your legacy. And so you can look at there's a shot of a bridge, and Jenny, I think this might have been one of the arguments we had was before widescreen, before DVD and stuff like that became a thing, you never saw widescreen on videotape. It was always like a square, right? And so Last Mohicans famously was released in a widescreen version that wasn't fully widescreen. I think it kind of widened out because it was too distracting. But I remember going crazy for that and the visuals, and I would talk and talk and talk to you about that, and you would say, what does it matter? I don't care. Like, I don't care about that. And I'm like, look, there's a bridge. There's a shot of a bridge, and you can see the whole bridge. And you're like, it's a bridge. Like, who cares? Do you remember that argument?
I don't remember about this specific movie, but I do remember it started out like I don't care, who cares? And then when when it did come out with the widescreen so you could see the whole thing, my gripe was that sometimes it made it so much smaller, like it was harder to see some of the details, and so it bugged me. But I've since come to appreciate the fuller view it gives one. So
Johnny, do you remember any of those arguments? Did I try to sway you to the dark letterbox side?
Well, I didn't take much convincing. I was on your side there, Darren. I wanted to see the whole movie when it looked squished. Um, what was the question again? What is there something else I supposed to say? I forget.
No, no, you're good. I just want to know if there was if we ever had anyone, did I ever sit you down and go, look at the
No,
differences here. You can see other sides. You
well,
can see the
maybe
sides, Johnny.
I don't know. As far as the you watching you and Jenny argue about that, I don't remember that. But
All right. Well, now we have HD TVs, so the widescreen doesn't bother people as much. But going back to that shot of a bridge, the way the reflection is the bottom of the bridge, the way that it's reflected, it's literally the shape of an egg, right? You go to when Hawkeye and Chingachgook and Uncas go to the Camerons. The first thing that the Mrs. Cameron says is, how come Uncas hasn't settled down? How come he doesn't have kids? And then Hawkeye's like, yeah, he meet like a plump white woman. You are the one, and bear him many children, right? And then there's the word seed comes up a lot with Magua about how he wants to destroy Monroe's seed, how he wants to kill his kids so he knows that his legacy's not going to live on. And then at the end, it's literally Chingachgook basically saying that like I'm the last, right? There are no more mates. The last Mohicans, which was my son, there's no more mates for him. My name is not going to be passed on, right? So it's all about sex and survival. But the way that I turned it, I really think this movie is about connections. Like if you look scene by scene, when Chingachgook, like you mentioned, Jenny, is talking, he's saying the prayer about the deer. That's the connection between Earth and the things that the Earth provides for people. Chingachgook is paying his respects for that, right? You get the shot of the bridge when you see or you see Hawkeye go to visit the Camerons, and it's about connections, the friendships that they've made. When they're out and the British soldiers are trying to enlist all the colonials and they want not have nothing to do with it, it's because there's no connection between them. They've lost that. And then it's Cora, like we mentioned, that she senses something is up with the Camerons. They're leaving them unburied, where she goes and talks and communicates. And so that's how they bond with each other, right? So I just think that this movie is really about connections, not just between the characters, but also between us and the Native Americans and pushing them off their land and how we don't sense that connection. We just want more and more and more. And like you said, Jenny, the Native Americans they have respect for that. As far as that goes and the whole idea of connections, I think that's really a strong subtext that really helps me appreciate the movie a lot more. I no longer think that it's a two-dimensional movie. I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on here that's apart from the main romantic leads. Jenny, what do you think about any of that?
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's about connection. I mean, biologically, sex is how we pass on our genes, but family, children, you know, back before modern life became so convenient and we were able to like not have to focus so much on just like farming for food and, doing all the things for survival. Um, that's what brought meaning to their life. Not to say that family doesn't bring us meaning, but we can, because of convenience, we can take care of our family and then go do other things that we're passionate about, like podcasts. But, but I also think that I totally hear what you're saying. I fell in love with the Camerons when they first went to go visit them. And when they went to find them slaughtered, I was devastated.
Yeah.
And the fact that they had to leave them there, knowing how much they cared for them and how heartbreaking that must have been for them. And then to have Cora criticize them for that. She had no idea what she was saying. But especially on the wild frontier, where you just had to hack out your survival. And I think that's also the plight of the poor versus the wealthy, because, they talked about how the Camerons had been in indentured servitude to even get to the Americas because they wanted a better life. But then they got there and it's not equal opportunity, really. They only had opportunity at the very edge of the frontier, where the government was wanting to push boundaries out further and further to claim more land and have people work it and make it productive for economy. And so it really, to me, highlights the connection of those that are trying to survive together and taking care of your family and really finding meaning in relationships versus the government that just seems so self-serving instead of wanting to serve its people. So.
Yeah, this is all ingrained in the movie. It is absolutely there. It's just a question of trying to find all that. Again, Johnny with and again, Jenny, just to mention that scene at the Cameron's homestead, that's the connection too. There's a disconnect. They're not communicating. I think that Uncas and Hawkeye and Chingachgook are just in such shock and such pain. They don't have time to explain to these white people what's happening. Like, let's just go. We'll explain it later. And so I think a lot of that. But Johnny, what do you think about the movie as connections?
Well, yeah, I'm going to copy Jenny's answer and say that I think the movie is about survival. You see it from start to finish. Everyone's trying to survive. The Indians are trying to survive. The Mohicans are trying to, the Hurons, the Mohawks, they're all trying to survive. And even the British and the French and the Americans, we all want to survive. So one thing I noticed that was kind of funny was when the Indians are constantly sabotaging or ambushing the British or the stream of people who are traveling. That's about survival too. And I think it's funny how they kneel down and point their guns, and the way they would fight, it was I don't know, not very smart, I guess I would say, because the Indians are being the smart about it. They're ambushing them, and they're able to rush in and take them out while they slowly kneel down, raise their guns, and
Yep.
say, "Hey, fire!" It's like, who thinks that's a good idea? So, the survival of the fittest is a good theme, I think, in this movie, because obviously the British weren't very smart in the way they decided to try to survive.
Right. Yeah, that's that's definitely something that's worth criticizing. And again, you're keeping those traditions. What I think, and I promise we'll see this will seep into the music so we can talk about that. But this obviously it has like the French and Indian War as a backdrop, right? The siege at Fort William Henry, that actually did happen. Monroe and Montcalm did try to basically negotiate, and yeah, they did let him go. But the Indians, like the Huron, didn't understand what was happening. Nobody was explaining that they were letting the white men go, right? And so in the middle of the night, before the British could even leave, the Hurons rushed in and started killing and ransacking the inside of the fort and started hurting the sick. And then they left and they kind of fought them off. And later, when the British were leaving, that massacre again, that accident happened. It's a very kind of dark period where the French just seemed to stand by and they didn't care. And they kind of put up a front kind of to say, hey, hey, don't do that, that kind of thing. But there wasn't really a fight that they put up. And so again, it's just a really dark period here. I like that that's used as a backdrop to all of this stuff. But what's really great, and Johnny, we've talked about this, and Jenny, I don't know how many movies you watch now that you maybe sense this, but a lot of times now, Johnny, a lot of movies aren't movies, it seems like. When we talk about Brian De Palma, when we talk about Steven Spielberg, when we talk about Martin Scorsese, all these directors, even Ron Howard, right? We talked about with Backdraft. There's moments in their movies, especially during the 90s, where you can sense this is a movie. Like all of a sudden it relies on special effects and sound effects and music and acting, and you can sense that there's an actual scene playing out. And the same thing happens here in Last Mohicans. The whole stretch again with the massacre, or at the end, I think the traditional folk song was "The Gale" by Dougie MacLean. That's what they used to sample the love theme in here. But that whole, I think it's a 10-minute, almost silent sequence where they're captured by the Hurons and then they escape and Hayward sacrifices himself and they run up the mountain and it's just the music. That's the definition of cinema, right? It's not relying on dialogue, it's not relying on stupid tropes, anything like that. I think there's a difference now versus then, where now a scene in a movie, it's superheroes rushing at each other and they throw punches at each other. And then it cuts to the other superheroes punching and wisecracking at each other. And then it cuts to the other superheroes. And yeah, it's entertaining, but to me, it's not cinema. It's just like little snippets of fun. And I think that's the difference between a lot of these 90s movies and what we're seeing nowadays. But like I said, I think the music here, the soundtrack was a big seller. That was big with all of us. Johnny, you've even said when you talked about your favorite scores, Last of the Mohicans was one of them, right? Which I thought was funny because it lulls you to sleep. But
Yeah.
still, and it's interesting. I never knew this until now. It's Trevor Jones and it's Randy Edelman who are credited for composing the score. I thought maybe Trevor Jones got in an argument with Michael Mann and then he was fired, and then Randy Edelman came in. Trevor Jones, we talked about him for Arachnophobia, Johnny.
Mhm.
He would do Cliffhanger the year after this. Randy Edelman, who did Kindergarten Cop and a bunch of other really good movies, he came in and the story is that Michael Mann wanted an electronic score for the movie, and then halfway through he realized I don't want that. I think I want an orchestral. It more fits the tone of the story being told, right? So now Trevor Jones had to go in and reorchestrate everything that he did, and he had to retouch scenes. And then Michael Mann was busy editing the movie, and so they'd have to go in and re-edit stuff. So it came to the point where he just ran out of time. So they brought in Randy Edelman to kind of pick up the pace and write the pieces that Trevor Jones wasn't able to compose. And on the soundtrack, the main soundtrack, they do split it up. So it's Trevor Jones first, and then it's Randy Edelman the second half of the score. I personally think that It's weird because the Trevor Jones stuff sounds orchestral, but then the Randy Edelman stuff sounds like it's electronic a lot of the time. It's really odd. But Jenny, what are your memories of the score, and what do you think of the score now?
I think it's one of the most memorable scores I have ever heard. Um, that the song that plays when they, I think the massacre had happened and they're running somewhere, or is it on the way to the fort? I don't remember.
It's after the
Anyway,
waterfall. It's after that again. Hawkeye and Uncas
okay,
they have
yeah,
to abandon them, and they run. They're running to try and find them in the Clannad song. I think that's the one that you're talking about. That's one that plays.
right, yeah. Anyway, that I was so, I don't know, impressed by that song that I actually choreographed a dance to it in high school.
Mm.
And my dance teacher, after the performance, um, asked me if I was gonna like try out for like the like major dance team the next year, and I had to tell her sadly that I was a senior that year. so
So no.
I I mean it was such a moving score. And you know the music that plays through the whole thing that like you hear right at the beginning of the movie, that it just has like really heavy Scottish vibes to me. And I don't know. I feel like Scottish and Irish music just like pull me in because I don't know. I feel it in my soul. Um, and I don't know. I felt like it was haunting and beautiful and memorable, and I loved it. So
Didn't you just? Isn't it mesmerizing the way that again the Gale, which is just like a kind of a guitar kind of theme, I guess, right? It builds in intensity as the action is building in intensity. That's what I'm talking about with the cinema. It's a
yes,
purely visceral experience, them charging up that mountain and trying to get Alice back, right? Trying to get Cora back.
yeah,
And so it builds and builds and it weaves in that theme, the main theme to the love theme. And I
yeah.
just think it's masterful. Johnny, do you also, first of all, what are your thoughts on the score? And do you think that it helps that they do play that Mohicans theme multiple times to really get you used to it?
Yeah, I think so. I think this score is iconic, and it's one of the only scores I said before that as soon as you hear it, you know what it is. You know what movie it came from, and there's only a few that do that for me. I mean, we mentioned other things like Superman and Star Wars, the easy ones, and Indiana Jones, and Braveheart. You can obviously tell that's what that is, but this movie, you go, oh, that's Last of the Mohicans. Like you instantly know where it comes from and what it is. And yeah, like you, Jenny, it is. It's beautiful. It's just such a good melody. It sticks with you. It stays in your head for days afterwards. One
Very
thing I thought
hummable.
might be kind of funny. There's a scene where I forget who it was, but someone was humming as the camera's kind of like passing by them. I thought, what if she was humming the theme to the movie? That'd be kind of funny. But I know that wouldn't be possible, but it would be kind of funny.
Becomes
But yeah, I
diegetic. Yeah.
mean, one of my favorite scores, I think, Darren, the reason why is because when we would drive to and from movie theaters to watch movies, we would listen to scores in your little car, and The Firm being one of them, Braveheart, and Last of the Mohicans. So you would play it in your car as we were traveling. This is why I like it so much.
Yeah. Really good stuff. Again, that's you need a good music score. It's tough to, like you said, you mentioned Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Those are it's tough to be on John Williams' level, right? And I think Last Mohicans did achieve that here. Um, so again, is final thoughts of the movie and everything. Let me give my final. Actually, no, Jenny, you go for it. You know what? No, I want to give you the last word here. I'll basically explain my final thoughts here. Again, I think that the action is visceral. I think that a lot of the subtext is there. Jenny, you're right. I kind of question, like, at the end when everything is said and done, and it's again, there's that connection, right? You see them on the mountaintop, and it's Cora, and then it's Hawkeye, and then it's Chingachgook, and that's basically the line that we're going for. It's like you have the last of the Mohicans who has, you know, stake over the land, and then you have his white son that he's raised, right, with with the Indian traditions, with the Native American traditions, and then you have Cora, who's playing the white woman, like he's basically being pulled into this world. So there's a line, a generational line you could see playing there, and I wanted to mention here in the making of. Michael Mann says this of that final scene when they're all up there, and again, Chingachgook is saying that prayer. He says the final scene of the film we're looking at wilderness, and the wilderness is the frontier, and the frontier moves like time. The frontier is conflict between past and the future, and it's a rolling zone, and it's rolling west in the Americas, and that's what they're looking at. They're looking at the future, and their individual lives will continue on, and people will come after them, and they will have struggles, and they will have lives just as we all do. And I think that that's very profound. That is what the movie is coming down to and what it's saying. And I think it ends in a way that you're like, okay, let me go back and rewatch this again and find out the stuff that's really layered in here. I think that's the main draw of this movie. And I think it gets across well as long as you're looking for it. Johnny, any final words on the movie?
Well, having seen it all the way through now, I can say that I do appreciate everything that I saw. I think it's really well crafted, it's well made, it's well acted, well written. The score is amazing. I do need to watch it again because I do want to catch the subtleties of things that I may have missed. I know they're there, so I do need to give it a few more viewings. So I plan on doing that. But yeah, just overall, I will say this too. When Alice is Alice,
Yeah.
yeah, when she was given that look and that tear in her eye, I did choke up a little bit. So it did get to me, right here. It got to me.
All right. Jenny?
The end for me, way back in the day, was super tragic because I was so devastated for Alice, feeling like she'd given up all hope in life and like felt like her only option was to jump. And, Uncas was dead. And I was thinking of like a lot of like Indian legend stories that I've heard over the years, and that kind of falling in line with those types of stories. What caught me this time at the end, and I do remember thinking this way back when too, when Magua is beckoning her to come back, it almost seems semi-redemptive. And I don't know for sure if that's what was going on, but it's almost like he finally recognized the devastation in her that he had felt.
Right.
And it's almost like, just choose life and I won't hurt you anymore. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know if that was his intent, but that's kind of what it felt like to me in that moment. But she, I think, was just so devastated by that point. She's like, I don't think I can live in this kind of damage after the fact. And so she's just like, I'm out. I can't deal with something that's worse than death at this point. I was also kind of caught off guard by Chingachgook, is that how you say it? And Nathaniel killing everybody in that party. I understand them wanting to keep Magua from hurting other people, but it almost felt like a revenge killing at the end. And I'm like, then what makes them better than Magua? So I was left feeling like they had become the monster, just like Magua had talked about wanting to become the white man. And
Exactly.
so I didn't love that. There was also one other thing that I had wanted to mention. Colonel Monroe, when, this would have been only like 11 or so years after the Battle of Culloden. And they refer to Colonel Monroe as the Scotsman. The Battle of Culloden was this huge uprising of the Scottish that then the British just like massacred them. And so when he was not wanting to let the settlers go back to their homesteads to protect their families, that didn't jive well with me, as far as like, I think he would have been more sympathetic to the settlers than he would have been to the British crown at that point, the English crown. So I feel like watching it as an adult, I see a lot more depth to it than just a romance that I had seen as a teenager.
Uh-huh.
And so I feel like there's a lot of good in it. I just feel like there's a lot of disconnect in the storyline that just feels to me. So.
Okay. Well, it's fascinating because we did have, when we had Jason on to talk about Braveheart, that was at one point his favorite movie. You remember that, Johnny? And we'd all really flipped on it. Now, and when we talked about it, Jason liked Braveheart the least out of all of us. That was really surprising. And Johnny's one that came up on top. So I think, again, that's the point with NostalgiaCast. Like we think of these movies and the nostalgia and the feelings that they bring, but when you revisit them, what stuff are we wrestling with, right? What's different now storytelling wise. I think even Mann has said that he's a better storyteller now than he was back then, and maybe that's why he keeps tinkering with the movie, with this movie in particular, because he wants to get that tone right. But there's also a difference between how we are and how we watch movies, which is something that you've made very, very clear. You were just in a different point in your life than you are now. And I think that makes the movie more interesting. There are shades here. It's not just two dimensional. There are things to argue about and things to kind of parse over and kind of discuss. And so I really like that about this movie. Again, yeah, this very visceral film. I'm glad that Johnny, you stayed awake. I'm glad that again, it's not just the silly romance to you anymore, Jenny. I'm glad that we kind of had that growth period. But it's different because usually our guests are like podcasters, and so we're like, well, where can we reach you on Twitter, and like, how do we get people to listen to your podcast? So I'm unsure how to really close out the episode, but I did promise somebody that they'd get a shout out, and I thought it was very funny when we first started NostalgiaCast, we covered a movie called Secondhand Lions, and there was a kid that I brought on for the movie that I was just really impressed by. His name was Dallin Curtis, and I had a
Yes.
great conversation with him. And then I started getting a friendship with his dad, AJ, and his wife.
Yes.
And so I've been talking with them constantly on Twitter. And so I messaged him and was like, because when I first started becoming friends with him, somehow it came out that they knew you because they're in
Yes.
Missouri and you're in
Yes.
Missouri and you were in the
Yes.
same ward, same neighborhood
Yeah.
even
Yes.
with them.
No, not the same neighborhood, but yeah, we went to church together when we very first moved up here to Lake St. Louis, which was like, wow, 2020, like 10 years ago now. Um, they lived up here in this ward and they became some of our favorite people. They have amazing stories to tell and their family is awesome. And AJ barbecues really well, almost as good as my husband. No, he's great. It's just fun to like poke the people that are barbecue masters.
Right.
But
So
yeah, and then
yeah.
Dallin is such a sweetheart. And when I found out that you two knew each other, I was like, this is weird. Like, how small of a world can this be?
Like I said, I don't know how the conversation came up, but I do know that AJ was like, I know Jenny. We love Jenny. I'm like, what's happening right now? Like, how do we know each other? And then
Yes.
Johnny, I think the ward that you were in, my cousin was actually, you were like, this Asian guy looks a lot like this other Asian guy that I
Yeah.
know.
Yep. I was in the war. Darren's cousin. What's his name again?
Was it Ben? I think it was Ben.
Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, really close with him. So again, very small world, and it's great that I just think it's funny that we had Dallin on as a guest, and then I'm really good friends with their family, and I chat with them all the time, and we wish each other good luck, and I like his temple photos and things like that. It's great. So it's just really fun that we all have that connection. But again, I kind of say that that's because it's you. Like you just have that connection with people, Jenny, and that's it's a wide ranging kind of love that people have, and it's a like because of your, I don't know, your personality, just the way that Johnny and I have always loved you and always appreciated you. So I really appreciate this conversation. I'm sorry that we kind of had to ruin Last of the Mohicans for you.
You know what? It's okay. It's been good to have that introspection. I still close my eyes through some of the violence because I'm really sensitive and I don't love violence. But I don't know, it was good to go back and revisit it because I feel like it speaks to so many important issues that I can see now. And I can kind of separate that now from like seeing through some of what feels put upon the storyline to make it a good movie.
Right. Well, I get on that. Okay, Johnny, did you have any last parting words for our beautiful friend here?
It's great seeing you again, Jenny. Thanks for coming on. It's great to catch up and everything. So keep in touch.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
I
it's good to
think
see you guys.
just for future references, I think it might be fun just to maybe bring you back on just to talk about a movie. I don't know if you'd be up for that, but
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
with Zoom and basically this kind of communication becoming so prevalent, I think that's a great way to stay in touch with people that you're not close to. So
Yeah.
again, Last Mohican's definitely something I think we still recommend, and we'll keep on trucking with our 90 season. Jenny, thank you so much for being my dear friend, and again, the sister I
Aw.
never had. My mom will always have dear feelings for you and negative feelings about the toothpaste brownies that you would like to bring over.
That, just so you know, they used to sell at our elementary school like Christmas store, Johnny. I don't know if you remember that, but people always like wanted the mint brownies in our
Yeah.
5th and 6th grade Christmas store.
I love them.
They were
Yeah.
like so popular.
I loved them, and it was funny hearing my mom go, "They taste like toothpaste." Don't tell her that though. I'm like, oh, and I'll
No.
tell her because I tell her everything.
Listen, when Jeff and I got married, he said the same thing. And for years, he hated them. And now, I don't know if it's because his taste buds are getting less sensitive because he's older, but he actually likes them. And I thought he was being body snatched because his tastes have changed so much.
All right. Well, everybody comes around on
Fine.
your mint brownie, so we appreciate that. Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Jenny, and we look forward to having more conversations again. Thank you so much for being you and for being our friend, and we love you to death.
Thank you. It's good to see you guys.
We'll keep on trucking, but until next time, I'm Darin.
I'm Johnny.
And in case your aim's any better than your judgment,
You stay alive, no matter what occurs. I will find you.
I do not call myself subject to much at all.
all great Natty Bumpo lines. We appreciate that. Okay, we'll see you next time, guys.
Bye.